All right, tonight we've got Jane Okagaya Shin with us. Know thyself and be free is the intention of her website. She is a teacher and a researcher of Vedic astrology, spiritual medicines like the Kambo medicine for healing, reintegration and healing of the emotional body, embodiment practices, the art of optimal health and well-being. These are all the things that Jane is into, and we're going to have a great conversation with her. Thanks for coming on the show, Jane.
All right. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, that sounds really good. The audio's good. Sorry for all the little hiccups there.
Not at all.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to talk about. I don't know where do you want to start this time around.
Uh, let's see, maybe giving an overview of some of those things that you introduced. I guess um, there are a lot of seemingly different things, but really it's just a way for me to share my own journey, my kind of my path to awakening and unfolding and developing into where I am today. Today, I feel like I'm in a place of sharing my process, my journey with others. And it's really allowed for some beautiful spaces to connect with people and to, become a part of other people's journey. And yeah, and really like through this whole thing, it's just, I feel like in line with what's kind of going on globally, which is an expansion of human consciousness.
Mhm.
And yeah, people coming together, healing and connecting, and really remembering the bigger picture that all is one, that we
Mhm.
are one, and that as we grow as individuals, we are um, oftentimes indirectly and sometimes consciously contributing to the expansion of everything else. And so that can be a very powerful thing to be consciously aware of what we're contributing. So yeah, so all of these little things that I do, Vedic astrology, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, combo, and I work with other entheogenic medicines or master plant spirits. And these are all just the things that I have found in my path that have helped me to reconnect with myself, reconnect with others, um, and really reconnect with what's going on in terms of me being a part of this human experience and remembering how tremendous it is, remembering the magnificence of life and really returning to my joy, and yeah, so that's really what I'm here to hopefully share with the viewers, with the listeners, and also my own supporters.
Yep.
And hopefully, we
Nice.
can get the communities together and continue to expand as we're doing.
Nice. Yeah.
Expand the hegemony. What's your? Do you have like if you had to pick like a top three out of all those practices, what do you think you'd pick? You could only do three.
um,
If you're like Jane, that's it. You got to pick three, no more.
okay. Well, I think that combo, and I work with master plant spirits, if I can kind of lump those together,
Yeah.
or shamanic medicines, especially from the Amazon. That would be one of them. Then physical embodiment practices, for instance, like yoga, tai chi, and qigong, and then Vedic astrology for sure. And if I can kind of give an introduction of those, and then also talk about how they really fuse together in my journey and practice. So I guess for me, um, it started about 10 years ago when I was living in San Francisco. I was practicing martial arts previously in Chicago, and then I moved to San Francisco. And while I was living in San Francisco, I stumbled upon the Bhagavad Gita. A friend of mine had given it to me. And when I read this book for the first time, I felt that I was holding in my hand the book of life. It's like, what the heck? Like, how do they know all this stuff? Like, who knows this stuff? And like, why, what the heck do I have in my hand? And I really felt that I was touching upon something magical for the first time. And it really like re-inspired me because, when we're kind of in the rut of a life that seems devoid of meaning and purpose, it's like we don't really connect to anything that's really all that like significant. That's how I felt, at least. So when I was holding this book in my hand, I was like, whoa, feeling that I had struck upon something very tremendous, or perhaps it had found me at that perfect time because I was ready for it, right? So then my connection to my martial arts and like what I was practicing in the body felt just completely different. I really felt like what Descartes talks about, like we are the rider that's here in the third eye, in the back of the, or in the center of the head. And that, like, I was really feeling like I was the rider in this body, right? That I was like this kind of crazy human technology, and I was the rider, and I was here. And then that was kind of the first bit of that awakening process. And of course, it took some time for it to truly unfold. Then there was that, and that actually took me to traveling to India and studying yoga. And I lived in India for about 6 months, studying and practicing yoga. And eventually, I did an apprenticeship there, also teaching other teachers to eventually, share the practice of yoga. However, interestingly, about almost 6 months later, when I was seeking out a travel visa to stay in India longer, India eventually kicked me out because it was time for me to go. I was realizing when I was there that I was staying because I was trying to escape something that was here in my life. In my young mind, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to India and do the real spiritual thing, which is to become a monk. So at that time, I like shaved my head, did the whole shebang. Like I wasn't using running water, wasn't using electricity. I'm like, oh yeah, I got it. I'm doing it. I'm a hermit. I'm doing what is called spiritual. Ended up, again, like I said, getting kicked out of India because where my work really was back home. And so I came back home, and I was really, very enthusiastic about sharing the practice of yoga with other people. Interestingly, while looking for work, trying to find places to teach and all that, I ran into Vedic astrology, and it was just during a time that I just was really hungry for knowledge, really still having that like enthusiasm of this new teaching, new practice, new way of living. And so I think Vedic astrology found me. It's like with everything else in my life, I feel like. And Vedic astrology was very tremendous in that previous to finding this science, my understanding of astrology was not a good one. Like the astrology that we're most familiar with
Like
is
in
what
the
is,
paper.
yeah, like in the Sunday Times paper, right? So we're like, okay, this is very general. There are 12 personalities, and I'm supposed to be one of them, right?
Yeah.
And it seemed very much like a science that was not very alive or accurate to me. And I personally have a very scientific mind, and it took me a long time to even come into this idea of like spiritual practice in itself. So when I came to be exposed to Vedic astrology for the first time, I realized that it was a science that was based on our connection to the cosmos. Of course, that's what we think of astrology in general, the traditional Western astrology, for instance. What I learned, however, was that the traditional Western astrology is not based on the stars above us. And I realized that because Vedic astrology is a science that is based on current astronomy. So the science of what we are surrounded by in this moment today. So realizing that, I'm like, wait, if that's true, then what is Western astrology doing? And that really like confused me for a while. And then and continuing to study the science, I realized that in the Western world today, our understanding of astrology is based on dates that are nearly 2,000 years old, 2,000 years out of date. And what this is causing, and from my exposure to people who, study astrology, is that people don't realize in the traditional Western astrological world that the dates that they are using are not current to current astronomical phenomena. And what that's actually creating on the larger scale is that the scientific community is looking at the metaphysical community here in the West and being like, you guys are crazy. Like, I'm looking at the moon right now, and it's hanging between Castor and Pollux, which we know is the constellation of Gemini. And y'all are saying it's in Cancer. You must be crazy because I'm looking at it right now. So what that's causing is like the scientific community looking at the metaphysical or spiritual community and be like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You are not basing your information on scientific data. And so what that's creating, again, is a huge rift, right? So what Vedic astrology has the ability to offer us, and in my sharing, I hope to do this, is to help reconcile the seeming opposites. Because in reality, there is no difference between science and spirituality. They're both just, again, seeming opposites that actually allow for a greater understanding of what is, right? So I truly hope that, in my sharing, that is something that we can come to understand, that actually what we're doing here is the same thing, whether you approach it from the scientific perspective or the intellectual perspective, or whether you're coming from the approach of like the emotional body, emotional healing, energy, whatever the root may be, they all lead to the source.
Yeah.
And so, when we reconcile these seeming opposites, I feel like, well, it's another example of Tantra, right? Tantra is like the sacred union of the seeming opposites, in which case, a lot of times we think of it as masculine and feminine, right? And we see that all over the world today as well, like women becoming empowered, men starting to understand like a deeper connection to the emotional body. Everyone in themselves is starting to find that reconciliation of seeming opposites, like my outer self and my inner self. And so it's happening everywhere, even in science and spirituality. So that's kind of how I landed into the world of Vedic astrology.
Hmm.
And on a personal note, and the reason why it became so impactful is before I left India, I was working with my Reiki master, and I was traveling with him for some time. And in his work, in his energy work on myself, I kept encountering the idea of mother. Like it just kept coming to me, mother, 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 mother. And I knew that I had a disconnect from my mother. And so that also was a big part of what kicked me out of India, because I needed to go deal with those issues, right? And then when I started to learn how to read my own energy chart, what's called a natal chart or a birth chart based on the exact time of your birth,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., the time of your manifestation on this plane, it was very apparent that I had some issues with my mom, right? My mother, or just our connection to that mother energy,
Mm-hmm.
energy of unconditional love, support. And so I saw that in the chart, but there's one thing to like theoretically understand something, and then there's another thing to experience and really to know it in your being. And not too long afterward, there was an interesting a thing that happened in my life, which was my sister. She came up to me one day. She's like, "I have to tell you something. I've been holding this secret for 3 years." I'm like, "What the heck?" And I'm like, "Oh," bracing myself. I already knew kind of what it was about. And she's like, 3 years ago, I ran into this old photo, and it was a marriage photo of my mother and father. And it was dated like 4 or 5 years after my birth. And so she questioned my father about it. She's like, "What is this about?" And then he was like, "Oh, I don't know." And then the truth came out, which was that the mother, the person, the woman who raised me as my mother was actually not my mother.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was a secret that I was actually orphaned at a young age.
Wow.
And that she posed as my mother. And so yeah, that's a huge turn of events in my life. And what I had originally thought was my disconnect with my mother was far deeper than I had ever expected. Yeah. So it goes to show that we might understand something theoretically, but until we start to experience it in our life, we don't really know what it means, right? We don't really know the feeling yet. So yeah, that happened, and was with huge turn of events that really that started to really get the spiritual awakening aspect in my life going. So that happened, and so I realized, okay, I'm adopted, and I had never met my birth mother before. So shortly after that, maybe just a few months, all of this is now exposed. I went up to my father and questioned him about it, and so he told me what had happened, not completely, and that comes to be unraveled later on in life. But then shortly after that, I was able to reconnect with my birth mother. So yeah, just something like 7 years ago, I just met my birth mother, and I realized and met also my two brothers. So it was a big thing that happened in my life that really catapulted my spiritual growth. So that's what happened on the externals, right? And then what's really happened is much later on down the road, I realized there's so much emotional trauma that's lodged in the emotion that's lodged in that part of the body, emotional body, that's also manifesting physically, and has like had so much of an impact on the way that I see things, the way I interact with people. And I realized that I was extremely isolated, very lonely person. I had a lot of trauma that I was holding on to that was preventing me from deeply connecting with people.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, like, we are pretty much like unaware of a lot of these things. And it was really like in my work in addiction recovery, because I forgot to talk about this before, but like I have a past of also addiction, and substance abuse, and alcoholism, which comes a lot from, again, these traumas that I had not faced and didn't really understand the sources of,
Hmm.
and had not reconciled them myself. And so what happened is I was holding on to a lot of this trauma. And it wasn't until I started working with people in addiction that I really saw like myself mirrored in all of these other people,
Yeah.
and how we're holding on to so much trauma, and it's just causing so much pain, but we're not aware of it. And because, I feel like subconsciously we're so scared of what we might find.
And what people might think, maybe.
Oh, totally. And especially because, as social creatures, so much of our survival has to do with being accepted by a community
Yeah.
group. And so it is very much a validated fear. But at the same time, like, yeah, I get it. But it's like, how much is that really serving us, right? With that, I realized too that the traditional methods of quote unquote healing addiction
Yeah.
and trauma is not very effective, especially working in a holistic addiction recovery that really uh, was quite amazing in their approach. It was very different from the types of recovery systems and programs that were already out there, that gives people a more overall approach into health and well-being, and really studying the self by meditation and practices like yoga. And we see this a lot really coming around these days. But I just felt like there was something missing there. And so that actually led me to finding kambo. Kambo is the venom of a poisonous tree frog from the Amazon jungle in South America.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. So yeah, I slap venom on people. I slap venom on myself. It's interesting though, because
On your tongue, you put it in your mouth?
no, actually, so kambo is administered through burns in the skin. So you take the surface level, you create an opening, excuse me, on the surface level of the skin through burns, and we call these gates. And there, the reconstituted venom of the poisonous tree frog is then placed upon those gates or openings. And that is how the frog energy system and the human energy system connects. And then because we're not ingesting it, it can be more controlled. So if a person is having a reaction, or when they come to the end point of their treatment, it can be taken off. And by taking it off, the effects start to subside very quickly. But if it was ingested, there would be no way of removing it, right? So that's why
Okay.
it's administered this way.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that are.
So you can just turn it off and on through a cut or a burn?
Yeah, pretty much. But in a matter of speaking, yeah, for sure.
How long does it take to shut off?
It's quite quick.
Wow.
The effects are still in your body, like the medicine has entered.
Yeah.
But by removing the medicine, it's what it's doing is stopping how much more is entering your system.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So like 10, 15 minutes kind of thing, or?
You mean that the
Like
medicine is on?
Yeah, if you remove it, like would it slow down within 10, 15 minutes kind of?
Yeah, it slows down almost like immediately.
Oh, wow.
Like you'll start
Wow.
to feel like it subsiding, but again, the effects are still in you. Um, and it's not like it completely goes away.
No, of
That's
course.
that's
Yeah.
not what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
It's more like, okay, the rising of the medicine that's subsided, and it's usually after a person has a feeling of completion. Again, usually because everyone's so different.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's removed because someone is having such a difficult time with it,
Yeah.
or for other reasons. For instance, if they're like really lightheaded or it's too much and they want to give it a break, maybe they'll come back and try it again the next time. So there are many reasons that would happen. But combo, I just wanted to say, is very different from like 5-MeO toad,
Yeah.
which is a psychoactive.
Is that a frog
Combo,
too? No, that's the DMT, right?
yeah, so that's a different medicine altogether. Combo is a non-psychoactive. It's completely legal in the United States. It is, the way I describe it, especially for those who are familiar with um, plant medicines, or like the medicine of, I call them earth medicines, right? Like these medicines that help with deeply connecting to different aspects that might have been disconnected from
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or we may have been disconnected from. So I feel like a good way to visualize it is you have like the psychoactive medicines on one side, like for instance, like San Pedro or ayahuasca or 5-MeO toad, and then you have like the medicine of combo on the other side.
So
The
Where
Where would-
psilocybin would be on the other side with DMT then?
yeah. The reason why I put those together, these are psychoactive
Yeah.
medicine
Yeah.
versus combo, which is a non-psychoactive. But think of it as like yin and yang, right? They're seemingly opposites to a complete whole. The reason why I say that is psychoactive medicines seem to work on the level of consciousness, like our awareness and our connection to like the cosmos, our infinite beingness. We have these like outer dimensional experiences. We're like, whoa, we're in the fifth dimension. I'm looking at myself from an outside perspective, right? I feel just in my exposure to working with the medicine community extensively, and from people I've run into along my path, that oftentimes this can cause a lot of ungroundedness if we don't have methods to integrating these lessons into our lives. It's almost like we gain a lot of theory about our life. Like, oh yeah, that's an issue that I have. I would like to look at that. We have all these theories. These medicines really help to connect us to like, oh, damn, it is all one, right? We have
Mhm.
these profound experiences of these reminders.
But how do you integrate that?
Right. And so combo for me has been very tremendous in that it really helps us to ground. It helps us to be in our body, and especially in spiritual practice. Again, in the idea of reconciling seeming opposites, like how do I reconcile the idea that I am the I consciousness itself, and I am also Jane? You know what I mean? Like I am also the one that is in this body, and this body is this tremendous technology that is actually helping me to understand my experience in a deeper fullness.
Mhm.
So then I have the opportunity, for instance, if I'm kind of severed or disconnected from my intuition, my body knowledge, and the wisdom of this technology, to work with a medicine like combo that's like, whoa, I remember now my senses are super heightened. I become so much more sensitive and remember how deeply I am affected by the energies around me,
Mm.
like in my day-to-day life. So oftentimes my senses will be so enhanced, like my sense of smell, for instance. I can really, like, especially my work, it's very helpful. I can smell when people have really bad digestion. Like, whoa, they got specific things going on in their digestive tract, whether it being like the descending colon, ascending colon, lower intestines, and stuff like that. You can really like start to
That
get
sounds real wonderful.
it can be nauseating, but I get used to it. Yeah, especially working in the area that I am in.
Well, it's a
I've
good thing you're not in
like,
studio.
oh, why is
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Why is it
yeah.
really
I
bad?
could imagine there's some smells flying around this motherfucker.
It's a small
tight
space, yeah.
Gosh. Yeah, again, like in my practice too, like I don't usually like I just like, oh, that's interesting.
Is it through like mainly through breath or body odor, or both?
Both,
Yeah.
both, yeah, and just becoming more and more exposed to like specific people and like their issues. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that might
Right. Right.
like, or that's how that might manifest, you know, things like that. I mean, you can tell in like the outer appearance too, like bags under the eyes, like skin eruptions, and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff,
Yeah.
you know. But in doing my kind of healing work, I've become. I think it's just kind of my nature too. I'm very non-squeamish with like bodily fluids,
Right. Right.
dealing with a lot of vomitous bile.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, it's good stuff.
So I've heard a lot from people recently. Like we've had some people on that have done that do retreats and stuff on this type of plant medicine and healing from addiction, all. But I've also heard the other side where people are they're getting wary as well, that there's too many people out there trying to do it, and it's kind of more of like a cowboy mentality where there's not enough monitoring and not
Need
enough
more Indians.
not enough
Cheers.
I agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. I think that just like with any spiritual practitioner, whatever wares we are touting or selling, or providing and offering, um, just like even as a Vedic astrologer, when a person goes to a healer or for spiritual guidance or pretty much any advice, really, it's like, yeah, you might have these credentials, but I always look to the person. Am I resonating with them, right? And also, like the power of their medicine that they are providing and offering is really going to be determined on the spiritual maturity of the person who's providing this medicine. So I really find that it's important to know the practitioner and the type of like spiritual development they have accomplished. And sometimes that's hard because people can talk, right? I don't know. It's one of those things that we're in a really interesting time, because this kind of medicine being specific, like psychoactive medicines being illegal,
Yeah.
it actually makes it much more difficult to be like having good practitioners. For instance, I feel very lucky that I've run into specific communities that are extremely responsible, not only responsible, but extremely like experienced and knowledgeable and very authentic and how do you say that, like really honest about their medicine practice. And I feel that because of that, I've had a really good experience with medicine. But same with you, run into so many people that have had like some terrible experiences, especially if the practitioner is not someone who's mature enough to hold a very safe space, or doesn't have the experience behind them to know what to do in a diverse setting, right? Because I have run into some kind of scary experiences even in just my time with working with medicine, and I'm not even holding the space, you know what I mean? So I'm like looking at the practitioner like, whoa, that's gnarly, dude. Right? So it can be definitely one of those things where you're like, okay, I want to make sure that I trust the practitioner. And for those who are seeking out this kind of thing, I would suggest like being patient, and understanding that if you're ready for the medicine, you will really attract into your life a person that can really support your process into this kind of spiritual awakening that you are seeking. For me as a practitioner, I never work with people I don't know. And that's just to keep myself safe. Additionally, I want to keep the medicine safe, right? If something happens, I can get into a great deal of trouble if someone gets hurt or they're unsatisfied. And so I want to make sure that I have a good relationship with the person I'm working with. Not only that, if something happens to them, like how would that appear as a reflection of this medicine itself? I want to keep this medicine safe. I really honor it as a sacred medicine, especially in my experience. Man, it's really changed my life.
It's crazy.
So for those,
it's crazy that putting combo aside a little bit, it's crazy that we're in a time, hopefully a short period, where to heal addiction from legal drugs, the best ways to do it is to use illegal drugs.
Yeah, seriously.
Or frogs.
Yeah,
Or
for sure.
frogs. Well, yeah, or frogs, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
And
combo is that kind of puts you more in the present then? Is that
Yeah, I wanted to ask more about that too.
Shuts down your daydreaming. Is that more of it? And
Are you talking about combo?
yeah.
Yeah, combo really helps with that for sure. It's like being more embodied, being more present in yourself, like means that like I can actually be connected to the communication my body is sending me, right? Like, oh, I really feel like the erratic energy of like even having, let's say, a television screen nearby. You're like, whoa, I didn't know I was really that sensitive to it. And it's not like it's making us more sensitive. It's just helping us release that which is preventing us from being how we actually are, right?
Which is also part of what Reiki or yoga or Qigong would maybe do, but over a longer period of time, right? Wouldn't it? I mean, don't you get some of those benefits from some of those actual physical practices as well?
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, I was using this kind of slogan previously. It's like we live in an extreme time, right? And sometimes we need some extreme medicines.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like the thing is, there's always that balance to be established in our practice. It's not to become dependent on anything, because it would be awesome for me if, you know, I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but like for me to like go to the Himalayas and meditate in in a mountain somewhere, right? It's just that's not what I've chosen to live in this lifetime. I've chosen to be here living in a crazy city in Southern California where there's all of these like eccentric energies. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of like chaos. And so sometimes, you know, it's not even sometimes, it's more like nature has also provided medicines that are just as crazy that will actually help us to establish balance.
Huh.
However, I do want to kind of go back to what you had mentioned about, you said it like in the day and age where we're dealing with this intense drug addiction from legal drugs, sometimes it's going to illegal drugs. I do want to make the distinction, however, between drugs and like medicine. I think that we kind of like blurt that word out just to like make it clear, especially for people that support my work. I just want to make it very clear, my opinion, my perspective on it, that there's a huge difference between medicine and medication and drugs. Although we do lump, let's say, for instance,
unless you're a cop,
like even marijuana,
Well, that was my point when I did say that it was in the context of cop. It was in the context of this is what the the institution thinks of it, not the culture, not us. So go ahead, even marijuana.
Yeah.
That's a drug.
I mean, she has a medicine, right? Because she is a plant spirit, very different from, let's say, like, actually, maybe not using that example specifically for what I'm going to say right now. Let's say using ayahuasca versus DMT. So DMT is the synthetically derived version or laboratory derived version of the master plant spirit ayahuasca, for instance, or any derivative of it. But when we work with a master plant spirit like ayahuasca, for instance, we are specifically connecting to the spirit of that plant. And, you know, I'm sure you've experienced in your own ceremonies when we work with her, she's in the room, right? We feel her definitely like over us, watching over us, creating the space. And of course, it depends on the strength of the practitioner holding that space, how deeply you can go into that journey, feeling supported by another being, right? Versus like, I personally have never been drawn to DMT or any synthetic version or derivative of this medicine for whatever reason. Perhaps it's because I've had these profound experiences with Madre or Mother that I just don't have any desire for it. But in my conversations with people who have worked with DMT, yes, you'll have this like explosive kind of out of body fifth dimensional experience, but it never seems quite like the the experiences I've ever had with madre or ayahuasca. You know, I mean,
Is
it's
it
just
like
such a
acid
personal-
versus mushroom sort of thing?
I feel like it can be. Yeah, I always feel like I worked with acid when I was younger. And this was before when I was more like playing and like
Yeah, I was
experimenting.
just gonna say,
I didn't work with it.
can
I
we call
used it.
worked with?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah,
abused
was
acid more than
right?
yeah.
Dropping acid,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Totally different.
Put it in your
So-
eyes.
But
Those were the
whenever I worked
days.
with acid, I felt like I was inside a television. You know, it was like
Yeah, I know the feeling. Like you're on display.
yeah.
I get that with mushrooms sometimes too. And one time
Yeah.
I did mushrooms on the podcast, and then that was the end of that.
You were on a podcast.
Yeah, we did a couple. We did one called Enter the Mushroom.
Oh,
And,
that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, Darren saw some pretty interesting things. He's
Yeah. I'm sure.
Good time.
that was like
I
our
do
most
have-
downloaded podcast for a while there. It was pretty
Oh,
good.
really?
Yeah.
You know,
So
I
And then
spent-
Darren got scared, took it off the feed.
Oh, really? Aw.
It's on the black budget now. Supporters only.
Supporters only now. So
There's only like 12 of them, so it's not a big deal.
So what I was gonna say is there a risk at because I have this. We all know the story of this guy. He's fairly famous. I won't say his name, but he had a really severe marijuana addiction, and he healed it through it was one of those ones like chronic
Hancock?
addiction and oh, you're a dick. What a dick. And he went to do ayahuasca and he healed it. Like he realized oh my God, like he's got this addiction but now he's been done ayahuasca like 85 times or something like that. So there's a risk for addiction there as well, isn't there? I mean, what if you're just replacing one with the other and it's even what people think of as these, healing spirit medicines or healing medicine, yet that becomes like for me, because I'm, what we talked about this before, but
And he's back on the weed.
I would like some guys consider, it okay to do psychedelics, but for me, like I won't do it in my recovery. Like because I know my own personality, and I'll be looking forward to it the next weekend, and then the next weekend until I'm doing it on a Wednesday night. I mean that's what'll happen to me. So
In the studio.
in the studio,
I need one.
I said Wednesday night.
one more before we do the show. Fucking leave me alone.
I think that's a great thing to talk about. It's something that I've also kind of run into in my own practice. I think to look at developing our awareness is really what we're trying to do here, right? So if we're kind of like falling into the use of these medicines or these ceremonies as a way of escape,
Mhm.
and being really honest with that is a really big part of like taking responsibility and
Yeah.
understanding that we are co-creators of our spiritual journey, rather than like, oh, I'm just like running the rave and oh my gosh. And like I think it has a lot to do with like lack of self-awareness, right? Or being in denial.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the spiritual community too, I've been running into a lot of this kind of thing, which is spiritual bypassing. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to a ceremony, I'm awesome, like this is like I'm doing my spiritual practice. But oftentimes, again, like no judgment, because people are in different places with their journey, and perhaps
That's a seed. I mean,
that
and that
Perhaps
might
that
be
person is in
the
that
first
spot.
couple steps or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And I find that it's more important to like go through that process and then come out of being like, whoa, I was really in denial. I was just using that just as another form of escape, rather than being like scared to try anything and just being locked in fear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, such a fine line. You really got to find out what works for you. But even with like marijuana, like for instance, for myself, having also this addictive tendency, because I have such an extreme personality, if I do something, I'm going to do all the way. So even like with like smoking marijuana, at first I would like smoke it once in a while, and it was after I had sustained an injury, and it gave me a great sense of relief to be able to work through the injury and
Mhm.
move on from there. But afterward, I just kept smoking it.
Yeah.
And what that revealed for me, and it took a long time to actually accept where I was, that I'm smoking a lot, rather than being so fixated on I can't be smoking. Instead, looking at like, why am I smoking so much? What is it that I'm trying to find relief from? You know? And it wasn't until I just allowed myself to be fully in that. And this is what scares people, I think. They're like, oh, I can't be doing that. And so they're just like resisting the fact that they are seeking relief from something. And if we were to not resist that and actually take it as an opportunity to look at what is it that I am looking for relief for, then I feel like it really helps us to find a different plateau, like, move out of maybe a plateau that we have found in our spiritual journey. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm good, everything's all good, but why do I keep smoking marijuana? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And instead of like, that's bad, I shouldn't do it, and then like spend months trying to stop doing something, look at why am I seeking relief? And this has been really tremendous for me. Like, not too long ago, it's like, why do I keep seeking relief? What am I seeking relief from? And then I realized I'm in a great deal of pain, you know. And again, going back to those traumas that we are really holding deeply in our emotional body, so much so that they've been relegated to the subconscious mind, that they're completely unaware to our consciousness. And it's when we do things like smoke marijuana and we're like, I hate doing that, it makes me feel terrible, allowing that to be this kind of shadow teacher, like my shadow is coming out to light. Can I allow the shadow now to teach me something? Like that's why it's here. It's those subconscious areas of our life that are coming back to the surface so that they can be examined and then healed and reintegrated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
yeah, I feel like the same thing with like ayahuasca or anything really. It doesn't even have to be like master plant medicines or studying astrology
Plain
or
old cocaine.
crazy. For sure. Not even that, like overeating or like sex addiction or like television. It can be really anything that we start to find ourselves like
Coffee?
escaping to. Coffee, it can be. It really
Wow.
is just depending on the
Come
person.
on, let's not go there.
Why
So
is someone drink? I love coffee, and it's not the best for me.
I'm
That's
trying
for
to
sure.
get down to 60 ounces a day.
how many?
60.
Are
What
you
are you at right now?
Dang!
I don't know, probably like 70, 80
70
maybe.
ounces.
Wow.
What like put that in a normal, like what's that for cups?
Well, I guess like
An
60
8-ounce cup
ounces is
would be
eight.
like
That's
10
that's
cups of
like
coffee.
8 cups.
That's
8 cups
like
of
3
coffee.
Starbucks.
No, how many grandes? Because that's the like you can't measure it in a 250 ml cup. That's not a cup.
That'd
That's
be
like 3
that'd be
grandes.
like 3 grandes.
We live in
Oh,
Canada.
That's not bad.
We don't
3
do
grandes.
Starbucks.
That's not
Important, damn
bad.
it.
Yeah, it's
Three-
not bad.
No, but if
really.
you put it in the grande
It's like
perspective,
two
it's
extra.
not that
It's
bad.
like 2 extra large Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
It's
Well-
like fucking
well,
nothing. I could
Darren-
just plow through that.
Darren, do you think that you're riding the wave of
I got a fucking job,
ganja-
Jane,
ganja
Of
coffee?
caffeine.
and I
of
gotta plow
caffeine.
through it every day.
Well, I don't know. I'm not saying anything in particular, but maybe it's something you can examine. You know, it's.
I
don't
should.
know.
Go down for some
These are the
toad
things-
stuff.
I should.
these
Some
are
combo.
the
I'd-
things that can manifest into bigger issues.
Does that make work
Ooh.
longer if you're on Toad? Would work be longer or?
Are you talking about combo
Yeah,
or MEO toad? So combo's a frog.
frog.
Oh,
sorry.
frog. We keep calling it a toad.
It's
I
a
think
frog.
I think it's
frog.
because you're thinking MEO toad.
No, we were
right?
thinking combo, but I keep saying
Okay,
toad.
combo.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so combo can definitely help. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk more about that process of combo? Because I don't think I don't think I.
You interrupted.
Yeah.
Classic.
Oh yeah, those are some important tangents, right? Okay, so with combo, it really helps us again to connect to the physical body, and on just a pure physical level, it's a detox and deep cleanse. So oftentimes, when we have, let's say, physical addictions, even to like sugar or different food addictions, chemicals in our processed foods and things like that, it can work as a physical detoxificant to release toxins from the body. I work, in a side note, I also work with colonic irrigation and intermittent fasting, extended fasting, and things like that. And combo can help to alleviate our physical connection, like metabolic like dependencies on certain foods, by giving it like what we call immune reset and lymphatic system reset. It specifically, in what I've seen in my own experience, it targets the liver, and the liver is working so hard to help us to keep up with our detoxification process. And so I've never seen this in any other cleansing technique. It gets so deep into the liver that you can see, like you'll see like a little bit of bile come up in vomit, for instance. But when you work with combo, you see like some neon shit. It's some crazy stuff. It's like so, I can't even describe it. It's like so yellow that it has like, it's almost solid looking. It's completely opaque. And oftentimes it'll like over time it'll turn like green, brown, gray. Oh, it's just like substance I've never seen come out of a person in any other method. It's such a deep, deep cleanse. And because it is such a powerful detoxificant, oftentimes people will have like skin responses, because of course the skin is the largest detox organ in the body. So sometimes like people will feel like their skin is on fire. And sometimes we'll get skin eruptions. I know I've had some skin eruptions from working with detox programs. And really what led me into working with combo is because of my own past of working with so many man-made substances like cocaine, heroin, alcohol. It's just so I just felt so like nasty in my body. And so it's really helped. And you know what? It wasn't until like I worked with combo for like 3 years, I feel so much more connected to my body. But it really depends on like how often you're working with the medicine, and also like what you're doing as a measure of integrating. I also want to mention for myself, what has been so profound with working with combo is that as an animal, as a animal spirit, the frog has no fear in its experiential field because it has no natural predators in its environment. So what it also does, and beyond just the cleansing, is it helps us to connect to our inherent fearlessness. And that allows us to start making like changes in our life that we may have felt like stuck in some way from being able to do. So for instance, like even beyond the physical detox, I have found people will like sever ties from certain jobs, certain relationships, and including habits and things like that. And oftentimes it's we didn't even realize it was because of fear, and also like the illusion of having certain duties and obligations to things, that I was unable to enact these certain measures in my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. What about people just with chronic illness, or there's a bunch of different things now that people are really having really a hard time even diagnosing or getting help through the Western medical system?
Yeah.
What about like so not addiction problems, but just really deep physical issues?
Yeah. So I've actually worked with some people with some gnarly health issues. And just like with everything in terms of like human experience, they all have some kind of spiritual energetic root, right? So yes, it will help to for the body to become stronger and to gain a great deal of relief. But ultimately, when I say integration, I feel like what I'm saying is finding those things in my actual life experience that is causing my body to physically manifest these illnesses. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So even like with substance addiction, that is a manifestation of a coping mechanism that is appearing because of something that I'm not dealing with in my life, or an issue I have not really understood, or a trauma that I have experienced that I have not fully recovered from, and healing that my body's like, we need to look at this.
Yeah.
So whether it be substance abuse or it be like a severe physical illness, they all stem from the same source. And it's just really like the varying degrees of severity that they have manifested in a person's life.
Do you know? Do you have any other areas that any other physical locations that do this kind of therapy, like combo, like anything in Canada or anywhere else besides? Like, would you recommend people to go
Is
to
it
other
like
locations?
a powder or a liquid or?
Oh, combo. So I'll answer that question and then go back to yours.
Darren usually interrupts me, so
Yeah,
ask
okay.
him. Answer him first.
That's
and then
why
go
we
back
call
to
it
me.
Grimerica.
So the way that the medicine is harvested from the frog is that the waxy secretion on the frog, which is the venom itself, is gently scraped off
And then dried.
put upon bamboo sticks to dry. And then, so the medicine is actually non-manipulated beyond that. Like, it's straight venom that's dried on sticks. And then the practitioner takes the medicine and just reconstitutes it with water. So it's just straight from the frog.
Straight goo.
So
Straight
So it's
goo
like
on
you
the cut.
drink it? Oh, you
No,
just pour the
you're
goo
putting it
on
on
it.
your cut. You're opening up a gate.
It's like
Mhm.
frog gel.
Pretty much, yeah. And so what we do is we create little balls of venom, and then we put that on the burn openings.
Could I just put that under my tongue?
Where do you usually put the burn? Like, where do you usually put the? Well, you don't want to do that because then you can't stop it. If you get too, you know.
How long does it last? But I don't know. I tend to jump in with both feet when is that an option?
Of eating it?
Yeah.
I would not recommend eating it because, one, you don't know how your system will react, and two, there's no way of removing it. Well,
No, but what if he doesn't
forever? Then I'm just like, fuck him.
What if he's already embracing? What if he's already embracing the frog animal spirit of no fear, and he's just
what
jumping
does the
right
frog
in?
say?
Yeah, I don't know if that's really following your intuition, because I don't think that would be so good for your survival. But again, I haven't done it myself. However, there was some times when I'll be like holding the palate and like putting medicine on, and there'll be a little venom on my finger, and like somehow, I'm like wiping my face, and I'll like feel it coming into my pores.
Wow.
And one time there's like, it kind of like got into my mouth, and I started to feel like numbing and also like a inflammation and swelling.
Oh man.
Oh, for sure.
I'd order
like,
me up some combo online, and that'd be boom. You find me in here dead with my throat swelled up.
Dude. Again, this is not protecting the medicine in any way.
Yeah,
That would not
exactly.
be good.
No.
It's okay. We'll hide. We'll hide it and say it was something else. We would never.
Blame the bread.
Never.
Fucking gluten.
But you were asking, Graham, about other places to get medicine.
Yeah.
Oh, were you asking specifically like where can we get combo?
Like in Calgary?
Hey, dude, I'll fly to Calgary.
Do we buy
awesome.
Do we buy it by the stick?
You can. Yeah, it's totally legal. You can purchase it online, like everything else, right? It's just that I would be wary of like knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put some on Graham's coffee. Bulletproof coffee.
Gosh.
So there are people doing it all over the place.
Is there like
for sure.
Yeah.
Is there like a spot where you burn yourself? Do you have a scar?
Yeah. So the tribes, like the tribe that I use, or I get guidance from a great deal, is the Matses, and they.
Sorry, we couldn't
Sorry,
hear
yeah,
when
we
you
couldn't
named
hear
the
that.
tribe.
What was that?
Oh, excuse the Matses.
Okay.
And they generally will, for women, they'll put the combo on the leg, and then men will generally do the arm or the chest. But as a practitioner, it's really anywhere you feel kind of intuitively called to do it, and where there's a lot of like blood flow. And it's not going to be a place where, for instance, for a woman, if you got it on your leg, but you wear like high heel, like high ankled boots or something, it's going to like cause some damage to the area, and that can cause like inflammation or irritation, which might even lead to infection. So it's just choosing a place that seems good for you. But really, there's no right and wrong in terms of where to place the medicine, because people put it on the chest, I put it on the back, on the neck, anywhere on the arms. It's just certain places, like, I don't know if I do the fingers, because there's a lot of like washing of the hands, which might cause irritation. And there's also like the skin is really thin in certain places. So the burns might be more uncomfortable, and blood flow is lesser in certain areas, like the feet, for instance. But really, there's no right or wrong place.
Okay.
You want it to be someplace you can reach, so you're not like, ooh,
Yeah, you
can't
can't
get it
Yeah,
off.
that would
You're
be a
not
smart
like,
thing for sure. If people have requested for me to place it on areas where, for instance, if they're having pain in a certain area, they like to have it placed there. I think because it brings like more localized focus to that area, energetic focus to that
Oh.
area.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's another thing that you can do. But if you're not dealing with anything specific to one side or an area, then really it's any place that you feel intuitively like inspired to work with. But I feel like people have the varying opinions on all
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
So I just order this stuff, the combo online, burn Graham,
Oh my
and
gosh.
rub some on, and then when he wants me to, I take it off.
I'm not doing it, dude. I tell you, it's not for me in Calgary. No, it's for,
Oh, well, whoever
for
you can
others.
also find practitioners who are experienced. I'm sure there are people in Canada doing it.
is that something you could do online?
Yeah, and I have the teacher that I work with. His name is Simon Scott, and on his website he has a list of practitioners that he recommends in certain
Oh,
areas.
there you go.
And yeah, so you can find a practitioner in your area. Yeah,
You
or
should
if you're in
go and
Southern
do the
California,
course,
I'll give
Graham.
you some burns.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
should do the
We'll
course.
do that California trip, and
You should
Yeah,
do the
there you
course so
go.
you could be the combo guy,
Yeah.
the local combo guy.
Yeah, and honestly too, like if you feel called to work with the medicine, you can eventually, I think, if you feel like, wow, I really resonate with this combo medicine, because I administered to myself, being a practitioner, and that is what really allowed me to work with it so often and frequently and so for so long in a way that was affordable and also accessible. And I don't have to like make an appointment with everyone and like go out to see someone, find a place to stay. So if you feel really called to the medicine, then I don't see why you couldn't like learn. But I definitely took an apprenticeship with my teacher and studied with him for some time.
Yeah.
So it's just like with anything else, it's really deepening your understanding to your connection with that specific medicine, and then studying and practicing it, just like with anything.
Yeah. So then how important after that is like the physical practices of stuff, like, you do Tai Chi and yoga and all that. I mean, I found yoga to be super beneficial. I mean, we're going to do a whole show on it. Although I have to admit, I've been totally out of practice. I haven't been like on the mat.
I do more yoga than you
in
these days.
7 or 8 months. So
Wow,
I seem to go through these phases where I'll go like a few years, like as soon as I get back into it, I'll get back into it. But then I have a hard time when I stop getting back on the mat for some reason. It's really weird. I have this.
Don't say,
I had this,
say
like-
on the mat.
I know.
Yeah,
I know
well,
it's bad.
kind of perhaps
Amen.
exploring a little bit more like what is preventing you from feeling amazing,
That's right.
Yeah.
what
Okay.
is-
Yeah. There is something there. Yeah.
Yeah, what is it that's preventing you from like integrating a practice that is allowing you to like, because really the physical practice, it really does help us feel amazing.
Yeah.
What kind of things that are we allowing to impede us from having that in our life? Is it like this kind of the illusions, of course, of like duty and obligation? I've got so much to do. Well, do you have so much to do that you compromise on your own health and well-being?
Mm-hmm.
And
Dungeons and
feel-
Dragons.
yeah, like what?
It's getting in the
Because I'm
way of my yoga.
Because
Yeah.
that's also
Do it
something
during.
What's that?
You could do it during yoga and Dungeons and Dragons.
Be like a new fad.
Yeah.
The dragons do
I've
yours.
done a little
Sure.
bit. I've done some
I
leg
don't know
stuff.
what Dungeons and Dragons entails. So
That's okay. That's good. Don't leave it at that.
It's just a new thing. It's just a new thing that happened to correspond with my stopping of the
I
yoga.
used to not know until we
Oh,
figured out
really?
that Graham.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was hoping
Well-
Darren wouldn't pick up on that, but he did. So I'll admit it now. I
It's
guess.
heavy,
Oh, yeah, like,
heavy,
is
heavy
it like
role
all
playing.
consuming where you would call it a coping mechanism or
Oh, I couldn't hear that conveniently.
is it getting to a point where you would call it a coping mechanism or an addiction?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. He has like
as hard
200
as that is to admit.
212-sided dice or whatever the fuck they are. It's
Oh,
fucking
wow.
crazy.
I
Well,
don't
you know,
have to.
sometimes you
No,
gotta
come
go
on.
through it and just like feel really shitty and then be like, wow, I need to get back into the practice. You know?
Being
Yeah.
Graham
I
ain't so bad.
feel like sometimes we're like so stressful on ourselves when it comes to practice. Like, I
Yeah.
have to do it this time. I have to do it for this many hours. And like we stop to like lose the joy in it,
Yeah.
you know? If that's happening, then I feel like, well, of course we don't want to practice anymore.
Yeah.
It's a killjoy.
Yeah.
You know, and instead we start to go into other practices or activities that we do find enjoyment in again. And so I think, besides looking at it and being so serious about, oh, like, why am I deflecting from my practices? Like, is it fun for you?
That's a
And
good
if
point.
it
Yeah.
isn't,
Yeah.
then freaking find something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. And I find a lot of times too, a lot of practitioners can become really serious. And when I guide a yoga practice, I focus on like really feeling amazing, you know.
Mhm.
And if that's not the center point of your practice, then it's very easy to fall away from it.
Mention some of the benefits too, though, of it, because I found it helped me be present, really, like having to listen to the teacher, listen to your body, focus on your breathing, really, really stay present. Like if you're not present, you're kind of just all over the place, and it would be very noticeable to yourself. and
Sometimes I
others.
just lie on the
Absolutely.
floor on my back.
Yeah, that's fine
Stretch
too.
my
Yeah,
arms out.
yeah.
Yeah. And aside from all the other practices, like when we work with like psychoactive medicines or even like physical medicines like combo, honestly, like the physical practice of yoga, for instance, or Tai Chi or Qigong, those have really been the cornerstone of my own life and practice and journey, because that's the time when you're like quiet with yourself,
Mhm.
and you are able to examine your life and examine your body, examine like, how do you think about yourself? How do you speak to yourself? What is my attitude when I find myself in a challenge? Like, really, your physical practice is a microcosm of those things in your life. And it's outside of all the distractions. Like when you're in combo, when you're in a ceremonial combo, like you are deeply in effect of this outside thing. You're connecting to the frog, which is something outside of you per se, maybe not in oneness and all that, but you know what I mean? It's like totally outside your physical embodiment and you're connecting to that. But in your physical practice, this is you. This is you. And that's oftentimes why I feel like people kind of shy away from that practice, especially as they go deeper into it, because they're becoming more sensitive. So maybe you've come to that place in your own practice, Graham, where you're becoming more sensitive and you're starting to tune into more of like how you really speak to yourself and what's going on in your mind. Because I feel like that's the most challenging thing. And ultimately, that's what we all want to explore more of, at least in the spiritual sense, is like, who am I when I don't have all of the other things that are distracting me?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, like my job, my responsibilities, all the things I do for fun, all the identities and the personas that I give myself. And if it's just me and the mat breathing in my body, like who am I really? And then we really get to become deeply acquainted with that. Of course, there are all the physical benefits. And that's, again, something that's very important, but really it's a side effect
Mhm.
of what's happening inwardly, which is a deepening a connection to myself, you know? And so when I guide yoga practices, a big part of it is like really noticing, how do I speak to myself? What voices arise?
Ah,
And so a big part of my understanding, my connection to the yogic practice, the physical yoga practice, is yoga chitta vritti narodaha. Yoga is the stilling of the mental chatter.
Mm.
The way I understand the mental chatter is the voices of everyone else. When I go into like a really difficult pose, or it's a pose I've never done before, and I start to realize, oh, I have these self-doubts, or I have this self-consciousness, or I feel weak, I feel fear, I feel competitive. All of these voices, that's what I find to be tremendous in my journey of awakening. Like, oh, what is that? Why are those things hindering me on my path?
yeah, that's a good
You
point.
know?
Yeah, instead of it being, positive, I can get through this or breathe through it or focusing on all the little positive things. Yeah.
Yeah, because also too in the spiritual community, there is kind of this illness, is this spiritual bypassing. When we feel awful, we're like, stay positive, think positive thoughts. But we're not really looking at what is it that's making me feel awful, you know? And so, I mean, this is, I think, is much more advanced later on in the practice. And perhaps, again, that's where you're getting to in your own practice, is like the physical elements. Okay, my body has become strong enough to do certain poses. Now I'm getting to a point where I can start to connect it to something deeper. Examine, okay, now I can start to examine, like, whose voices are those?
Yeah.
You know, it's usually the voices of our parents, our friends, our, you know, society, our culture, our government, social programming
Yeah.
that's really coming up. Like, you're weak, you can't do that. Oh, you're overweight. You need to work on this, that, and other, right?
Yeah.
And so these are the things that can come up that we can really start to examine. And then also, I feel that we are supported with other options as well, because I feel a lot of times people fear looking at those things, because once they look at it, it's like, okay, now what do I do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, well, now what do I do? I realize I feel really shitty in my job. I feel really shitty in my relationship. I don't feel completely fulfilled with this, that, and other. And so they're fearful. We are very fearful of looking at those things because okay, say, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah. How do I get
And
out of
so then we have the support systems of community, and also like healing, Reiki, um, energetic healing, as well as like combo and master plant medicines, for instance, and all these other things.
that?
But even yoga itself can help us to alleviate those things. When I feel powerful, when I feel stronger in my practice, that starts to translate into my waking life, my life outside the mat. You know, when I notice that I do this pose for the first time, I really suck at it, but I do it again and again and again, I realize, oh, it's become easier. Through familiarity, it just becomes integrated, right? So I start to take that same lesson into my life. Like, okay, I'm doing this. However, what's really happening is I just need to face it, breathe through it, and then through that, I realize it becomes easier over time.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I'm bypassing it or escaping it, but because I know how to deal with the situation and I trust myself more
Mm-hmm.
and I feel more empowered. I'm a stronger person.
Yeah.
And so, again, like all of these other medicines and practices, they've just become support systems. But really, the foundation of my journey has been the physical embodiment practices like yoga,
Yeah.
Tai
Yeah.
Chi.
What's the
Qigong.
one called where you lie on your back with your arms over your head? That's my best move. I'm not really
That's
good.
actually-
I'm not really good at any of the other
a
ones.
very difficult one for most people. Are you talking about Shavasana, where you're just lying on your back?
I just lie on my back and I stick my arms
Yeah.
up over my head as far as I can, and I try and get
That's
the
so
backs of
funny
my
because-
hands
It's-
to touch the
Try
ground.
your
I
shoulder
feel like
down.
that's the most difficult pose for so many people.
Me
when I'm,
too.
for instance, like, guiding
And I
a
can't
yoga
even do
class,
any other ones. Me and my wife
I
will
mean-
start doing yoga, Lisa, and then it's like she's doing the thing, and I'll try like 3 moves, and then I just poof, I go to
Three
I go to
moves.
the
I like
line on the back.
I like how you call them
Oh,
moves
really?
too.
Well, my shoulders are so
moves.
fucked. It's a mess.
Really? Well,
like a-
there are things that you can do to strengthen your shoulders, right?
Surgery.
And you can always make
No. I said the prolotherapy. You got to try
All right.
the prolotherapy. Have
That's
you heard of
Yeah.
Have you heard of prolotherapy, Jane, at all?
Prolotherapy?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's a naturopathic thing.
inject stuff in ya.
Instead of cortisone, is it cortisone the thing I'm thinking of?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like sugar water and a little bit of freezing, and it helps regenerate your joints and stuff. And there's a couple guys in Calgary here that do it and
Oh,
injecting your
wow.
joints. It's very, very it's natural, very healthy, and
Oh, super
rebuilds
cool.
everything. Yeah, like all kinds of. My girlfriend swears by it for slipped ribs, or she gets sciatic all the time. She's got a lot of crazy physical stuff going on, and it helps her like instantly. So.
Oh, wow.
Helped a guy at work too with his shoulder and his hip and
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff. So
And it's covered.
and it's covered. $500 for most insurance plans. $500 a
Oh,
year.
wow.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
They
Yeah.
couldn't help me.
Yeah, that's awesome, because then you can like be able to feel strong enough to do practices.
yeah, yeah. Oh, Brody, you tried that? It couldn't help you.
Well, no, I talked to the doctor and they told me there's nothing like
Nothing they could do.
until I quit work. Like it
Oh,
doesn't
that's right.
work if you're still
If you're still doing it, yeah.
it would
Yeah.
only
Doing
work
the
for
thing
me if I
that's causing it.
retired. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That sucks.
What were you gonna recommend, Jane? Were you gonna
For what?
recommend something before Graham said prolotherapy?
Oh, prolotherapy. Well, I mean, there's certain modifications that you can. It really depends on what the actual issue is, of course, right? If there's inflammation, I think it has a lot to do with diet.
What's your
So-
issue, David? What's your issue?
My shoulder is a mess.
No,
It's
no,
a
I
mess.
well, a mess
Just
is
hurts,
very
grinds,
vague. It just
grinds,
grinding.
Yeah,
hurts
yeah.
all across my
Is it-
chest. It'll tighten up all those muscles and it just rips it all. It hurts.
Well, I mean, like
Massaging
generally
it
a
helps
lot of-
sometimes, or stretching it helps. Like yoga helps. That's the main reason I do yoga, is because it kind of loosens everything up in there.
So it looks like there's a lot of tension, right? Tension and tightness. So generally that has to do with stress, or are you sleeping well? And we're gonna have to go back to it, like the coffee. That's gonna cause a lot of
Let's not go
tension,
there.
right, in the body.
Huh.
So I mean, it's most things in the body and in.
I thought I smoked
life.
enough weed to
It's fascinating.
offset the coffee.
But I know I've been there before, where we're in this kind of cycle where like
She swallowed the
the-
spider to catch the fly.
yeah, something like that. For sure. You know, we get this relief, but then we're like kind of so inebriated that we need to like drink a lot of coffee to wake back up, to get the system going again. And then we're just down on this crazy roller coaster. So that's why I choose not to
Hair of the
anyway,
dog.
yeah. It just takes me down this crazy spiral and I can't get out of it, you
That's what whiskey does to me.
know. Oh, the crazy spiral?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
it can get pretty fucking carried away.
He ends
pretty
up
quick.
on acid and ecstasy at the same time in the middle
Oh
of his
my
long. No,
gosh.
I'm just kidding. He's allergic to whiskey. He breaks out and a bunch of
Oh, do you really?
psychedelics. No, I'm just kidding.
Firewater. I break out and all sorts of terrible things.
So
Not,
So-
a, lot of, not a lot of good comes.
So before we run out of time, let's try and get on to some sort of bigger topics and stuff, because you're interested in work like, you know, you mentioned the Vedic astrology, and I was going to ask you about like the 2,000 years out of date thing, and like and why those dates are out of date. Is that because that was generated based on a sort of a man-made calendar that doesn't match with the true cosmology, that kind of thing, or
Well,
or-
that's definitely what's going on too. Like as an example of that, the man-made calendar and how
or
it
not
doesn't
not
align with
man-made but
anything energetic.
made? Yeah.
Yeah. The Gregorian calendar,
Yeah,
for
that's what I
instance,
meant.
and how it doesn't match up with anything really energetic. As an example, like January 1st, 2018, we call that New Year's, right? We call that the first day of the year. But energetically, it was not a time that was conducive for starting anything new, you know? So because it is kind of this arbitrary date setting, and we're like, oh, because of this Gregorian calendar that says this is the first day of the year, we're going to put with it those activities that seem
Ah.
to be of newness and starting new regimens. But actually, energetically, we're not being supported in starting new projects because it's actually in the waning phase of the moon. You know what I mean? Because this year specifically, I'm talking about New Year's Eve, I believe, was the full moon. And right after the full moon, we start the waning cycle,
Hmm.
the cycle of decrease, closing down, being like more introspective and being more private and things like that. And yet, because the Gregorian calendar is set to 1/1/2018, we have this like cultural mindset of like, okay, time to go to the gym and start this new program. And so we're kind of like fighting against the energy that is there.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
and
What about the
however,
equinox? Is that
there
a good
an
day?
exception. What's that?
What about like the equinox coming up? Is that a good day to start something?
So the equinoxes and like the solstices, they're actually based on the amount of sunlight that is reflected on the earth, right? So that in itself is not so much connected to like the Gregorian calendar system. It's actually connected to something astronomical, right? So that would be
Because that always shifts, right? It's never the same each year. It's kind of, it can go 3 or 4 days
Yeah,
past.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's specifically connected to to astronomy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The
The
specific
physical
amount of sunlight.
Whereas January 1st is always January 1st, and it's different than
It's just an arbitrary date set by the Gregorian
you know,
calendar system.
it'd be interesting to see.
If
when
anything,
it
New
did
Year's
line-
should be on Christmas.
What was?
Well,
What
actually,
was-
New Year's should be on December 21st.
Well, if the new year, it would be connected to like the astronomical new year, right?
Yeah, like it
Which
should be the first sun after the solstice or something. That would make more sense.
it would be the first new moon after the winter solstice. Like
Yeah.
Does
yeah.
anyone
like,
do
it would
that?
be around Christmas.
Yeah, I was gonna say if
Yeah, they
there's
do
a
that in India, they call it Makara Sankranti. It's connected to the first new moon in Makara, which is the zodiac of Capricorn.
Makara Santa Marte.
Something like that.
like, wouldn't it be
Makara
really
Sankranti.
interesting to see what New Year's did line up the closest with the actual thing, and see how people did on the resolutions that year?
For sure, yeah. And so what I do is I provide like a new moon reading for my followers every cycle, so that we know like what celestial lessons are opening up for us during that time. So, for instance, like going back to like the New Year's thing, not being so particularly stuck on January 1st having to be the time to set New Year's resolutions. If we were to start our New Year's resolution, let's say on a new moon cycle, then that phase is waxing. So by appearances, the moon is becoming more and more illuminated, right? So that's a growing time. And so new projects and starting new beginnings and things like that is really being supported during that time. However, this is the same case in every lunar cycle. So we don't have to wait like a year to start new projects, right? So right now, being in a waning phase, although I do want to say that right now it's the 29th, is it?
Yeah.
Because I know that the podcast will be out later on.
Yeah.
And
That's
I don't
right.
want I don't want people
Yeah.
to be thinking, oh, this is the waning phase.
Yeah.
So today we're speaking in the waning phase of being the 29th, but just being more weary of like what, or maybe just more aware of what part of just even the lunar phase we're in can help us to make better decisions about when it's good time to start things or end things, right? And just in that practice alone can help us feel much more connected to a larger picture. And this is a really big part of fifth dimensional expansion, like the expansion of human consciousness. And the way I understand that is like right now, living in like the fourth dimension, like three-dimensional things like myself and yourself and objects moving through time, being in the fourth dimension, we're very much like very like myopic in terms of our experience being like what we see in front of us. But when we start to realize that all things are interrelated and there's a larger picture, that is the start of being in the fifth dimension, where we see that Earth is actually part of a solar system, is part of the greater cosmos. But really, this kind of expansion doesn't happen until we go beyond the theory and we start to experience and live the theory.
Do you go to the fifth dimension sometimes?
I think I'm in the fifth dimension right now.
Do you ever see Trump there playing chess?
That 5D chess, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty good.
Well, in the fifth dimension, Trump is my brother.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, that kind of gets into like Nassim Harame's work
That's
a little
it.
bit, doesn't it?
We just went alt-right again.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, wow, what a tremendous time we live in when we see people like Nassim Haramein getting to a point in their work where, for instance, like he's mathematically proven the oneness of the universe. Like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
We got to have
And
that guy on the show.
Yeah.
Seriously. So just coming to things like that, you're like, wow. But the thing is, again, it's just theory. Like we come to understand these things, we're like, wow, that's amazing, right? But until we really experience it in our own lives and start to live it and start to like encounter it on a day-to-day, we haven't really actually gone into the fifth dimension. But to have the theory, as one of my Taoist teachers says, root is the theory. Theory is the root of practice. So oftentimes when we have an understanding of like what I'm trying to understand and feel, it really helps us to kind of like channel our focus. Just like when we channel sunlight through a magnifying glass, you can create a fire. It becomes a lot more powerful when it's focused into a small space. I feel like theory really helps us to do that in whatever area we're doing. Like, for instance, in understanding oneness, we might have the theory of oneness as it is already mathematically proven, but do I really feel it? And start to recognize, am I able to make eye contact with someone and feel like they are my brother, they are my sister, and that is actually me, and I am them, and start to really experience that. And the thing is, if we don't, then we know that, hey, I know where I'm at, and I know where my practice can lead me. And when we start to recognize how far I am, or how disconnected I am from that feeling of oneness, then I feel that our healing process makes a lot of sense. Like now, working with ayahuasca makes sense. Working with Kambo makes sense. Doing yoga makes more sense.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just like physical health, but like really what we all want to achieve on a spiritual level is that integration of our true oneness to all things. And to know that there are things out there, and they always have been there, that is and are supporting our expansion toward that experience of oneness is super profound, right?
And sometimes it takes more of a maybe it takes more of a scientific explanation, like what Nassim will do to really help open up that other bunch of people that really kind of would rather have that technical aspect to then, like you said, be able to picture it and then be able to feel it after that.
I agree with that, because even when we start to actually look at yoga philosophy and the teachings of yoga that go so beyond just the physical practice is actually very young in comparison to the larger philosophy. It talks about how we're all unique composites of the same elements, right? So we've got air, fire, water, and earth. We all are a unique composite of those elements. And because of that, we will all have a different predisposition to different elements. So for instance, for those people who are very air predominant, they're going to be highly intellectual. And so their process of unfolding may take a very intellectual route, right? But being just intellectual, you can just see, because I have all the elements within me, that somehow I will still feel incomplete because I have not experienced oneness.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, they may not be so intellectually oriented. They might be more like emotionally oriented.
Like water.
That too. Yes, and that too can lead to an experience of oneness. And really, whether it be intellectual or not, like you had said, that might be like the starting point of what might lead people to, what I have in my life is pretty amazing, but I know that I have not experienced that feeling of connection to others. Like that's so important. Like, so what? I'm really intellectual and I can understand things in theory, but if I don't feel connected to the person that I see right next to me, or walking down the street, I don't feel like, I want to make eye contact, say, hey, what's up, brother? Hey, what's up, sister? Like, there is something there to be investigated.
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing, and I want to just make sure to emphasize, knowing that if you do feel that disconnect, it's something that we can use as a starting point, being like, okay, this is where I'm at, and not to feel any shame or guilt in it, but know that that's part of our journey, because that's how it was for me. I was severely disconnected with people, and through that process, through my own unfolding, man, it's become so tremendous, like what life really is. And to realize that life for me has been this journey back home, this journey back to a realization that all really is one and is completely beyond just that theory. It's a real deep sense, like a heart sense connection, not just like a heart sense connection. It is a heart sense connection.
Yeah. Wow. So
FNA.
Is there, before we get into how people can, contact you and how sort of how they can actually participate in all that. What do you have anything else you want to share about that before we kind of start wrapping it up?
Maybe to speak a little bit on Vedic astrology.
Mm-hmm.
We had started to talk about how, it's like 2,000 years old, out 2,000 years out of date, this Western system.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why that part of it is important for me to address in my own work is the fact that when we are actually back in alignment to current astronomical phenomenon, we can literally start to feel the celestial energies at play. And that in itself helps us to experience this fifth dimensional expansion. Because there's one thing to like, let's say Nassim Haramein's work, to understand the oneness in theory. Vedic astrology is has been so profound for me, because through my study of it, I have realized that what celestial bodies are doing out there, per se, as the macrocosm, as the cosmos, I can literally feel inside my body. I can literally feel in my experience with others. And I can start to see that what is happening is that the energies out there and that correspond to my own energetic body are just all of them in a process of evolution. So when I become acquainted with what those energies actually are myself, I can start to really make sense of my own psyche and like what is happening on a day-to-day when I encounter someone. Like, oh, I went through this experience and man, I was kind of shitty to that person. Okay, what is that energy? Okay, that's energy of Mars, that's the energy of Saturn, energy of Venus. And I can start to see that what's happening is that the universe is providing these opportunities for me to work with that energy for it to evolve, because that's what's happening. And through this process, the energies become alive. It's not something that is just like in theory, okay, Saturn does this, Jupiter does this, etc. Now I can start to feel it alive in myself. And then this for me has been tremendous in my becoming aware of what is even the fifth dimension.
And you can kind of think that they're the way these other planets and these celestial objects are interacting, I mean, the energy does physically shift, right? I mean, there is different electromagnetic spectrums and different things going on physically. So it is interesting how that interplays with our body and our consciousness.
Absolutely.
It's just hard to picture.
Really
it's hard to picture, but there's something there.
But we're also assuming around Earth.
Oh, come on. Don't even go there yet. Yeah. And
I mean, everything is at play. It's just that this is like the most immediate macrocosm, right?
Right.
It's like the most immediate
right.
macrocosm that we can actually study and see. And actually, that reminds me, I was listening to the Black Market feed. So I haven't just subscribed yet, but I will. I think it was Randall Carlson.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Black Budget. Yeah, Black Market. We should call the Black Market feed. Oh, that's good too. Yeah.
It does seem to be available on the black market.
She found the Black Budget on the black market. That's pretty good.
The new website will fix all that.
She's been on the dark web looking for the Black Budget.
Yeah, for sure.
When she was buying Toad.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, Randall.
So Randall Carlson.
Yeah, all the Randall you can handle.
Yeah, man, that guy is so cool. And just seeing like even how tremendous his work is in terms of like fifth dimensional expansion, or expansion of our consciousness as a human people, as a human race, and seeing like, he talked about the evolution of the planet and the evolution of humanity eventually moving toward being a spacefaring race.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So a big part of fifth dimensional expansion that I see is that as we as individuals expand and start to become a part of the fifth dimension, really that's how we become a spacefaring race. When we start to expand beyond our localized
paradigm
experience, our paradigm of like Jane's life, I'm in this room talking to you, and see that in a bigger picture of like a cosmic happening. When we start to all or at least a majority of us start to all come to a point where, this is what we call in spiritual like community ascend into the fifth dimension of like understanding. That's when we can start to ascend as a people off this planet.
Yeah.
And right now, the way that the celestial energies correspond to our energetic body is like sun and moon is here, Mercury is here, Venus is here, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, so forth. When we ascend off this planet, we now, like physically, have ascended out of the fourth dimension, physically into a larger dimension. Now we are like in space. We will now be corresponding to, I think, Darren, you're alluding to it, is that we'll be actually affected by a different scape of celestial bodies.
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah,
we will
yeah,
no longer be on Earth being affected by those planets.
Yeah.
So once we actually ascend off this planet, now we're going to be affected by a larger dimensional scape.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's just
no,
freaking-
totally. Yeah, it'll be a different dimension completely.
Yeah, even physically. So our energetic body that is right now corresponding with the immediate macrocosm will have a different immediate macrocosm.
Well, just imagine if you're on a planet with 3 moons. I mean, that would be totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And so we will no longer
Shit
be,
probably gets crazy on that fucking
Yeah,
planet.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
You're like, is it time to renew myself yet? Or you got to wait for all 3 new
I don't
moons at
want
once?
fucking
And
anything to do with that place.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that'd be super cool. I don't know. I feel like if it's moons, because moons have to do with like our intuition or psychic ability, I feel like that'd be super cool. There'll be other dimensions in terms of our psychic potential.
We missed all that.
yeah, you got to try twist your cord. I think we
Oh, did
missed you
you?
on that. Yeah, I
Dang
don't
it.
know what happened there.
All right. Well, I guess it's not meant to share.
Yeah, that, yeah, yeah, exactly. Leave that little part out.
There you have it.
You never get to know the secrets of the 3 moons.
Yeah, yeah,
Unless you
Yeah,
watch
so,
Chronicles of Riddick.
yeah.
My work right now, I'm actually working on some videos to talk about all this stuff and
Oh,
what's going on
cool.
in the cosmos, so that people can tune in. Previously, I've been working through articles, but I feel like interacting through video is so much more powerful, because I often talk about like how our experience and what we're conveying is so beyond words. So to be completely limited to, let's say, an article, physical written words would limit us to a certain kind of understanding. So I feel it's time for me to reach out in video form so that I can
Awesome.
be more interactive.
Yeah, good.
And it's also a little bit faster, it's more free flowing. I'm not like editing and all this stuff.
Oh, that's a good point too.
Editing's
out.
for suckers.
Yeah,
So
there will be some editing involved for sure, but I can put out a lot more information.
Yeah.
So do you have a YouTube channel then?
I will hopefully by
Oh.
the time this video this podcast comes out.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
you got a few weeks for sure. So as soon as you have
Yeah.
it, send Graham the URL and we'll throw it in.
Yeah, I'll throw a
Cool,
link in.
'cause
Yeah.
I'll have that. They're already in the works. The first one I want to talk about is the difference between Western and Vedic astrology.
Oh, good.
How coming to understand Vedic astrology can help us become more in alignment or deeper in alignment with current astronomical phenomena, and really start to feel specifically the macrocosm and how it's affecting us, and how we can start to experience this fifth dimensional expansion. So that'll be really cool. I'll get that out. And then hopefully with every new moon, I'll also have a video, maybe also an article, because people seem to like those, about what the new moon forecasts and like what celestial lessons are there for us to partake in and grow. And yeah, so that's what's in the works right now.
So how do
but yeah,
people sign up to that then?
you can sign up by sending me a message through my website, okagaya.com, to join the mailing list. And then I'll just slap you on there, and then you'll get one every month. And I'll also send out any information on upcoming events. So yeah, there's also some workshops in the development process. One is to really sync up our connection to the energies, the astral energies, through the chakra system, through sound bath.
Oh, I love the sound baths. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you going to use for stuff like crystal bowls and didgeridoos and stuff like that? Or
Well, a friend of mine who I'm hoping to collaborate with. He works a lot with the what do you call crystal
Yeah.
bowls.
Yeah.
He also works with chimes,
Oh yeah, those are good too.
floating
Yeah.
chimes
Yeah,
that kind of whirl,
yeah.
and it kind of like is like a vortice of sound
Oh,
that
that's
is able to
awesome.
like really hone in. Yeah, so that's in the works right now, and that way, like not only just theoretically feel like what the energies are, or like learn about what the energies are,
Mhm.
but also like start to really feel it and start to feel a resonance and a connection, like vibrationally.
Oh yeah, that's what I felt all my chakras open up through a sound bath kind of thing, like breathing and sound. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I also through my journey have just experienced so much tremendous healing and connection through vibration and
Yeah.
sound
Yeah.
that I feel like how tremendous
It's
to bring
important. Yeah.
two different works like that
Yeah.
together.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, that's also in the works. Hopefully, by the end of the year, if not earlier, that's going on.
Where are those going to
And
be, down in Southern California?
yeah, Southern California right now. Hopefully elsewhere, but right now, I think that the community here I'm working with, I really deeply resonate with, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, if
Yeah.
you ever want to visit, would love to have you guys. Also to any of you viewers, if you're listeners, if you're in the area and would like to join, please just shoot me an email. I'll keep you posted on the events and workshops and things going on. Yeah, and if you ever want to attend one of my classes, I'll also have posted on my website like my class listing, so you can join in anytime.
Awesome.
Tell them
Yeah.
Grimerica sent you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right on.
And you know they're good people.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
blast.
come back anytime. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, I'm sure we'll send Graham down to SoCal one day soon.
Yeah, one of these days we.
I was trying to send him to Kentucky, but he won't go.
Oh, really?
No. I'm
That
just.
was supposed to be a good one.
Yeah,
We'll
he's
see.
out.
We'll see.
He's out. Grumpy
Well,
Graham.
if I'm in Canada, I'll hit you guys up for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
sounds good. You can come and smell the igloo.
All right.
Probably.
We're not going to be puking any
Same
fluorescent
bullshit.
bile or anything like
No.
that, though.
I've done that one.
Yeah, me
Okay.
too. Okay.
Right on.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jane.
Jane. Have a
Okay,
good night.
Talk to you soon.
Guys.
Okay.
All right, take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.
That was a chat with Jane Shin. What do you think, buddy?
That was great. That was fun.
That was a fun one,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Always
Kind
a
of
fun one.
Maybe it's kind of inspired me to try get back into yoga a little bit, and I was really close to going. I was looking up classes the other day, so I was
Well, you're
close. I
done.
got to the gym though, so
You've
I
managed
chose
to-
the gym
oh, did
over
you?
yoga actually. Yeah,
There you go.
And
you
then I got
managed to
sick,
You're onto
so-
like cold cuts and
and
vegetable.
oh yeah, no, that's going good too. Yeah, but I got sick, so it makes you wonder. I should improve
your
my
body's
diet and
fucking-
and it's like going, what are you
You're
doing?
withdrawing from
What are
all
you
those
doing?
fucking things.
All those simple carbs just going. We need more. I don't think it was the
That's
keto flu.
I was
Precious.
gonna say that's called carb sickness.
No, I don't think it was. I think
It was. Are you
it
kidding
was
me?
the chemtrail laden
No,
forest
no.
fires,
Get the fuck
all the
out
smoke
Right? The
Come on.
chemtrails spray the stuff on the trees,
And
and
then
the
the-
forest fire burns the trees.
burns the
so we're
trees.
breathing all that chemical.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
that's exactly.
And this is why you have no credibility.
I don't need credibility.
We're just fucking podcasters. We
So,
don't need the
Are
credibility.
you gonna do the Campbell thing?
The what?
The Campbell, the frog, the burn yourself a little gate in your skin. Put the Campbell on, and then if you get too high, I'll take it off for you. I promise.
Oh, I don't know.
Not
Maybe
that. No,
one
it's
day.
not about getting high. It
Maybe
shouldn't
if
be-
someone sends some,
I'm not trying to say
send
that,
some to
but
the
to the PO box.
the PO box. Who knows? Stranger
No, but
things
that
happen.
was inspiring, man. I don't know. I feel like she's only touching the surface of Randall's work as well. Like he goes deep into a lot of that stuff. I mean, pretty cool. She's into Randall and the Seams work and mixing it all with healing from addiction and the spiritual growth through yoga and all this other stuff. I think it's great.
Absolutely. Check out all Jane's stuff. Yeah, if you're in Southern California, check out her website. Sign up for a class.
Or what?
A class? Her website?
Yeah.
What's that?
Just making fun of your slur.
Okagaya?
Yeah.
Okakawa? Sign up for a class, support her work. Of course, while you're on the internet, head over to grimerica.ca/support and support our work. Weekly, monthly, yearly, one time, Patreon, anything you want to do to support us, we would appreciate it because not too many people do.
Because you want to become a 1%er.
Yeah. And because you're the shit. Anyway, what else you got?
That's about it, buddy.
Do all the shit in the show notes, please.
All the links are there, yep.
Yeah, because we fucking said so. How's that? All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. Pow.
So we got some, do we have some live
We still have
people
live videos
on
shut down.
YouTube and Grimerica.fm, all that kind of stuff?
Shut down the video first.
We're going to have to do a intro in about 10 minutes. Or are we going to talk to, we have to talk to somebody else first?
No, we can do that after the intro. Let's get all the recording out of the
You
way.
want to do that?
Yeah.
Get the recording out of the way first. All right.
So let's shut the video down. And then we can, so bye video people. Thanks for coming out. And then we'll come minutes if you're listening on the radio.